I'm the host of Talking with Famous People, and the gentleman currently beginning this live stream. Today we're going to talk in part, but not entirely, about the Women's World Cup. I've been watching it. I've been finding it interesting. I thought it would be worth reviewing my experience over the first number of games. In order to do so, I've decided that I need to look at the results. So let's look at the Women's World Cup, and we can look here at the results. So I've watched most of the games, but not all of them. I didn't see New Zealand nor Norway play, nor did I see Australia play Ireland. But I believe I've seen all of the rest of the games. So my opinion about this is fairly informed. Switzerland beat the Philippines and looked decent, I guess, but not that impressive, Nigeria looked impressive in its draw against Canada, who surely has to be one of the favorites given that they won Olympic gold 2 years ago. Hello, Bobby. I didn't already say that. And Japan, of course, looked the most impressive, but they were up against lowly Zambia. Denmark and China was probably the most evenly matched game I've seen, even though it didn't end in a draw. Denmark won the game, but China was, it could have gone either way that game. That was a very evenly matched game. England squeaked by Haiti. They dominated possession. That's what happened today as well with France and Jamaica. France had all the good opportunities. They dominated possession in the second half. In the first half, Jamaica looked dangerous, but in the second half, France really took over, but they still couldn't score any goals. And as a consequence, Jamaica and France tie. Fortunately for France, the two teams likely to advance from that group, Brazil and France, are still likely to advance from that group. They're not in like the group of death, which is a group of the U.S., Netherlands, and Portugal in it. I watched that Portugal-Netherlands game, and the Netherlands clearly looked like the better side, but Portugal looked potentially dangerous in various occasions. Shaw looked dangerous for Jamaica, but she's out. She got double yellowed. The second yellow was really not justified, but she's out for the next game. She's Jamaica's best player. It's going to make it hard for them. Now, Sweden looked meh against South Africa. I'm not really feeling like Sweden's, like, if you're looking at European teams that I've seen so far, the Netherlands looks the best. Sweden looks meh. France looks good in the second half, but not good enough to win the game. England and Denmark both look kind of meh. I mean, Denmark looked better. Denmark was against China, which is a much better squad than England was up against. So I have to give Denmark the edge there. But I guess I didn't see the Spain game. Who did they beat? Oh, no, that's right. I saw that game. They beat Costa Rica, but there were 2 own goals in that game. But still, it was due to Spanish pressure. Spain can dominate possession. And it's like you can really tell how lopsided this game is, not by the score, but by the number of corners. It's like the most telling thing. At one point in the game this morning, one of the games I was watching. It was like 11-1. Maybe it was the France game where they had like all the corners. They had but they didn't have all their shots on goal was a little bit less lopsided. It was that, but you can tell how much a team's dominating the game, regardless of the score, by the number of corners. The team that has way more corners is definitely dominating the game. Anyway, it's been an interesting World Cup. You know, everyone's playing cautious in their first games, so it's like you know, Jamaica was definitely playing for a draw, especially in the second half. And we're kind of lucky to get it, frankly, given how many opportunities France had, but they just couldn't put it in the back of the net. Unbelievably, we still have a group that hasn't even started play yet, Group H. Germany, Morocco, Colombia, and South Korea, because they've expanded this field to 32 teams. Um, it says Mexico's Liga MX Femenil having impact at Women's World Cup. Despite Mexico not qualifying, no league whose home country didn't make the World Cup sent more players to the tournament than Liga MX Femenil. So it is kind of surprising that Mexico didn't make the tournament. It's 32 team field. Obviously, they don't pick the 32 best teams in the world to compete. They pick the best teams out of each region. So it's like that's why you have teams that are ranked like 70th or something in the World Cup is because they're the best of their region, which isn't a very good region. Tonight at 11 p.m., which should be an interesting game, Italy versus Argentina. Certainly, if it were the men, it would be a very interesting game. I suspect Italy and Argentina's women's teams are equivalently high level to their men's because both those countries are soccer crazy. And they're first world enough that um, women can do things. Did the A's win because I stopped following? They were up by 3 and winning. I don't know. I've been a little neglectful of my Oakland A's lately. I periodically check on Shea Langoliers' progress, but I haven't been watching a lot of A's games lately. Howdy, Acacia. I kind of got out of the habit of watching A's games as we were getting into the run up to the wedding. I had a lot of stuff to do that was not watching A's games. you know. Uh, and I haven't quite gotten back into the habit. Right now, I'm obsessed with the World Cup. I love watching World Cup soccer. I'm not a soccer expert by any stretch of the imagination. I know American sports way better than I understand soccer, but nevertheless, I've been watching it now. I did greet you. I said, "Hi, Bobby," if I haven't said so already. I specifically, those are my exact words. Hi, Boba Fett. Hi, Hero Lamb. Hi, Acacia. And hello, Bobby. You missed it. You were not paying attention during that moment when I said it, obviously. I interrupted what I was saying about the Women's World Cup to say, "Hi, Bobby," if I haven't already said so. Regardless. Germany, Morocco. Germany supposedly is one of the stronger teams in the tournament. They must be ranked maybe number 3 in the world or something. It's not easy to find out. I guess I just Google it. It's not easy to find out on ESPN's website what the list of rankings is for women's teams. Uh, FIFA rankings for the FWWC 23. Okay, there, Google. Now stop bugging me. Women's rankings. So, Germany is actually the number two team in the world, according to this. I thought Netherlands was, but I guess not. It goes USA, Germany, Sweden's number three, England's number four, France is number five, six is Spain, seven is Canada, eight is Brazil, nine is the Netherlands, and 10 is Australia. I'm surprised to see Japan all the way down at 11, Norway, Denmark, China at 14. Now, all of those teams made the tournament. Number 15, Iceland did not make the tournament. Italy made the tournament. South Korea at 17, 16 Italy, 17 South Korea, 18 Austria did not make the tournament. 19 Belgium did not make the tournament. Switzerland did at 20. Portugal did at 21. Republic of Ireland did at 22. Scotland didn't at 23. Russia didn't, probably because of Ukraine. They didn't have an opportunity to even. 25 is Colombia. They didn't make the tournament. New Zealand is the host, so they made it automatically at 26. Czechia, 27, didn't make it. Argentina is actually 28. That's not very highly ranked. They're going up against, what did I say? Italy. Italy is ranked 16. So Italy's definitely the favorite in that. They made the tournament. Finland at 29, Wales at 30, Poland at 31. They didn't make the tournament. 32 is Vietnam. That's very highly ranked for Vietnam, actually. They made the tournament. 33, Ukraine did not make the tournament. Serbia at 34 did not make the tournament. 35, Mexico. I'm surprised to see they're that low. And I'm surprised to see Costa Rica just one below them at 36. They did make the tournament. Oh, no, wait. Was it Costa Rica? Or was it something else? I need to make sure about that. Yeah, it was Costa Rica. Okay. Chinese Taipei, or Taiwan, but they should be called, 37, did not make the tournament. Romania didn't make the tournament at 38. Slovenia didn't make it. Nigeria made it at 40. Chile didn't make it. Hungary didn't make it. Jamaica made it at 43. Thailand didn't make it. Northern Ireland. Why does Northern Ireland have its own country? That's dumb. Philippines made it at 46. Slovakia did not make it. Paraguay didn't make it. Uzbekistan didn't make it. Myanmar didn't make it. Now going to 51 through 100. Venezuela didn't make it. Panama did make it at 52. Haiti made it at 53. South Africa made it at 54. But Papua New Guinea, Cameroon, Belarus, Ghana, Croatia, India, Iran, Greece, Turkey, Uruguay, Bosnia Herzegovina, Cote d'Ivory, Ivory Coast. Did Ivory Coast make it? I don't think so. No, they didn't. Ecuador didn't make it. Israel, Fiji, Equatorial Guinea, Albania. Morocco made it at 72, though. So all those teams in between didn't make it, but Morocco made it at 72. Jordan, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Zambia then made it at 77. Hong Kong, Azerbaijan, Algeria, Mali, Senegal, Guatemala, Bahrain, Guyana, Malta, Laos, Egypt, Malaysia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Tonga, Guam, Cuba, Lithuania, Bolivia, Samoa, Estonia, Kazakhstan, and the Faroe Islands. None of them made it. I think the lowest team that made it must be Zambia at 77. They have to be the lowest team in the tournament because the teams remaining are teams 101 and lower. Nepal, Kosovo, Puerto Rico, Solomon Islands, Indonesia, New Caledonia, Tahiti, Cook Islands, Dominican Republic, Congo, Moldova, Congo DR, United Arab Emirates, Of course, the Arab countries aren't going to have good women's teams. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, Luxembourg, Cambodia, Latvia, Togo, Cyprus, Vanuatu. What the hell is Vanuatu? The Gambia. Why is that country called the Gambia? Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Georgia, Mongolia, Kyrgyz Republic, North Macedonia, Palestine, Singapore, St. Kitts and Nevis, Suriname, Cabo Verde, Gabon, Guinea, Turkmenistan, Lebanon, Sierra Leone, Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Armenia, Angola, American Samoa, Benin, Namibia, Bermuda, Kenya, Tajikistan, and Botswana. Round out the top 150. There's more than 150? No, there's only 150. Oh no, there are 188. 188 possible countries that could compete in the Women's World Cup, including at 151 St. Lucia, then Tanzania, Barbados, Sri Lanka, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Timor Leste, Pakistan, Syria, Malawi, Maldives, Uganda, Dominica, Rwanda, Liberia, Seychelles, Niger, Cayman Islands, Grenada, Lesotho, Saudi Arabia is ranked at 170. Shocking with their women's rights history. Bhutan, Belize, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Antigua and Barbuda, Burundi, Eswatini, U.S. Virgin Islands, Curacao, Andorra, British Virgin Islands, Aruba, Comoros, Madagascar, Anguilla, Turks and Caicos, South Sudan, and in last place is the country of Mauritius. Mauritius. They were doing pretty bad. They only have 188, but their lowest ranking ever was 203. I guess they must have dropped some countries from the possible choices. I really expected better of South Sudan. And come on, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, what are you doing down at 178 in the men's? Get your act together. You know there were that many countries in the world? There's a lot of countries, huh? What about Turkey? How did they do? I don't remember. How did they do? Turkey's kind of can't decide whether it wants to be a Western country or a Muslim country. You can't be both, Turkey. Choose wisely. Don't choose the poor choice. You've chosen poorly now, Turkey. You should never have chosen poorly. You should have chosen wisely. Um, you guys were all talking about shows that were on when my daughter was watching cartoons. Antarctica doesn't field a team, actually. Colombia did not make it. There is no Yugoslavia anymore. Now it's whatever it broke into. I don't remember. Fairly Odd Parents was definitely Nickelodeon. Columbia did not make it. They were sad. Arthur was on PBS. I think you're right about that. That's probably why we never watched it. We didn't watch PBS. We watched Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. That was pretty much it for cartoons. I remember when Delilah was like 3 years old, maybe 3.5 or something. I took her to see the Powerpuff Girls movie. She was super excited about it. Delilah did not like Ed, Ed, and Eddie. She didn't like it. She didn't like how Eddie was. She just didn't like the FE, you know. No, soccer balls are not still black and white because that Jeremiah fix would be racist. So they fixed their racist soccer balls by making them yellow or different colors or whatever. What was Sailor Moon on? Cartoon Network, I think. Of course, Cartoon Network cannot be trusted with anime because they put the dubs up, and the dubs are not good. Dexter's Laboratory was pretty funny. Stupidity. And that guy who was Dexter's enemy guy, who was in love with Dee Dee, he was hilarious. Animaniacs has a great song, which had some good episodes too. My favorite is the one with uh, where they're dealing with William Shatner. I don't know if he's actually William Shatner or not, but no hair allowed. Sisters were closed captions. You got it wrong. But I like the episode of Animaniacs where William Shatner is trying to make them behave. He's saying, "My little friends, my small friends." That was really funny. Dubbing is a hate crime. Let's just put it that way. Dubbing Japanese cartoons is a hate crime. Just read the fucking subtitles. You have wits. When I hear American actors doing an anime, even if it's a native born American anime, I'll put on the Japanese dubs and English subtitles. I gotta tell you, what is a super fucking intense and ultra real show is Jabba's Reincarnation season two. I mean, season one was fantastic too. Don't get me wrong, but oh my god! So it's like, he's a teenager. He spends years chasing after this girl, and finally she decides she to to bang him, and like he wakes up the next morning expecting to have a girlfriend, and she just left a note saying, "We're not really that great of a match. I'm bailing," and she just disappears on him, ditched him, after they spent years together, and he's not sure why she did that, and I'm not sure why she did that either, except that she didn't understand. I mean, it's subtle. Like there's a lot of subtle stuff going on. But so now he's moved to this other place, and he's kind of like getting over her a little bit. And in this episode today, there's like this new girl who really is into him, but he she's like, okay, well, why don't you, why maybe instead of walking me back to my inn, why don't I go back with you to your room. And then he can't get it up, and she thinks that he doesn't find her attractive, so she says these things like they're kind of mean to him, and then he goes downstairs, starts getting drunk, and oh my god, it's and then this friend takes him to a prostitute to help, and it still doesn't work, And then finally, towards the end, he's telling and the correct advice, which is you just have to let this emotionally grow first. Oh, it's not cynical at all. No, it's not cynical at all. It's like it's dealing with actual life shit that happens. This guy was heartbroken by this one girl, and now he's not ready for intimacy yet again. And so, but it's like as I I had to just stop it and just go, oh no. Because then, like, where I left off in this current episode, he's partying with his friend. No, he doesn't sleep with the prostitute. He doesn't. But anyway, so like as he's parting ways with his friend, he's trying to sort of like build himself back up again, and so he's saying things like, I'm not even into that kind of girl, her kind of girl anyway. She's too flat chested for me. I like girls with big titties. But as he's saying it, she's walking up behind him. I just like, oh no, no. He doesn't mean that. He's just trying to repair his shattered ego. And she's not going to understand that. It's so real. And the thing is, of course, it's so real for what's a textbook isekai guy, hardworking Japanese salaryman dies in some sort of weird accident and gets reincarnated into a world where he doesn't have to work at his horrible job anymore, which is a constant theme in these animes. I'm watching one this morning called, it's a new one that it only has 3 episodes out so far. It's called like Zombie Bucket List or something. It's like he he writes in his notebook, he titles it 100 Things to Do Before I Become a Zombie, because all of Tokyo is becoming zombies. When Tokyo gets overrun by a zombie infection, he's ecstatic because he finally doesn't have to go to work again. and and so he's just free and easy now, living life large because the zombies have made it so he doesn't have to go to work anymore. And then he finally like meets up with his friend, and his friend tells the truth. He says, "I know it looks good from the outside, and I brag about my success and stuff, but it makes me dead inside, and I hated every minute of it." And he jumps across this. Yeah, I've seen episodes of that Hero Lamb. It's not really for me because that kind of thing that I'm talking about in this anime, the characters are supposed to be like 16 years old. This textbook age for characters in anime. Granted, they've had a previous life in which they've lived till their 30s usually, but it, it just it I'm not sure what Louis C.K.'s MBTI is either, but and I am going to give you full credit, Hero Lamb, for evaluating the thing on its merit rather than letting it be influenced by Louis C.K.'s somewhat spotty history of behavioral problems, right? But the thing about Louis C.K. is I guess in some sense, since I kind of learned about his proclivities, and since his failed attempt to publicly respond to it in any meaningful way, um, I can see through his comedy a little bit better. So I don't I don't find it as effective. I can see that he's battling his own demons too much, and I don't find that funny, even if the jokes are good. I see the human being too much now. When he was at his peak artistically, he was walking very challenging lines successfully. And that's impressive, right? It's artistically very impressive. But now that I see it as more an organic expression of himself rather than artistic deftness, I don't like it as much. It's like, as an authentic expression of your conflicted stuff, you shouldn't be conflicted about those lines you're walking in your jokes, right? And you should be very clear and unconflicted about those things. If you're just demonstrating your deftness as an artist, then okay, I'm going to be like, wow, that's impressive. That's funny, even though it's a dark subject and that sort of thing. Normally, you think you can successfully make jokes about, right? Well, that's fine. I'm impressed by that. But if it turns out that now I'm wondering if you're actually conflicted about those things. You just seem like a. I can just smell the FI on you now. I don't know if he is. Somebody here said he was an INFP, they thought. I don't know what type he is, but when you're being. He's too clean in his work to be an INFP. I think he's most likely an INFJ, frankly. But like Kurt Vonnegut, I can't. Like, okay, this joke by Kurt Vonnegut. Here's an example of a great joke that's not impacted at all by my perceptions about Kurt Vonnegut, because this is just Kurt Vonnegut demonstrating what a genius artist he is. Roses are red and ripe for the plucking. You're 16 and ready for high school. That's fucking genius, right? But the thing is, now that I understand who Kurt Vonnegut was, having watched this documentary, that ultimately he was a terribly lost INFJ who abandoned his family when Slaughterhouse-Five became like the it thing in society. He hooked up with some younger woman, left his wife and family, and regretted it the rest of his life, but never quite came to terms that it was something he ought to regret. Continued to sort of say it had to happen, but not. Because the scope of the regret would be too massive for him to possibly cope with. And so instead, at the end of his life, he's kind of pathetically advocating in favor of extended families, the necessity of extended communities and families, like the Unitarian Church and stuff. Wow, I mean, he's just externalizing his own unconscious horror and anguish over having been misled in that moment of hype into forsaking the things that were genuinely important. So he didn't have a living family at the end of his life, But he could still be quite funny. And sometimes insightful. I don't think F. Scott Fitzgerald had a very good life either. But another INFJ artist that I suspect INFJ. I mean, you can never type somebody without typing them, really. But If you read enough of an artist's work, you get a sense of what type they like there. Like, there's no doubt that Saki, aka H.H. Monroe, is an NTP, probably an ENTP, possibly an INTP. I'm gonna say ENTP more likely, just because there's a lot more NI pop in those extraordinarily dense bits of text than I think an INTP would pull off. He wouldn't work NI that way, I don't think, an INTP would. Anyway, so I think H.H. Monroe is an equivalent level genius to F. Scott Fitzgerald. And an ENTP equivalent of an INFJ author. I don't know what H.H. Monroe's life was like. I think he had a good life until he died in a war that he didn't have to participate in or something. He was like, well, I'm going to volunteer, and he got shot and died or something like that. Terrible loss of talent. Apparently he was a homosexual. So it doesn't really come out in his writing though. You know, see, there's a general disdain for romance, I guess you'd say. A lot of committed bachelors and or disinterested husbands. But you want to talk about a cynical writer, but hilarious and brilliant. H.H. Monroe is somebody everybody should read. Also, H.L. Mencken is another ENTP probably that people should read. He should be more respected than he is in the canon, so to speak, but he suffered from being primarily a writer for periodicals, like newspapers, specifically, actually. And I think that as a consequence, a lot of his work was sort of afforded that same disposability as other stuff in the newspaper is, but inappropriately so. He's quite a smart man. There's somebody Corey should read. H.L. Mencken. He demonstrates extremely well how to deal with the challenge we all face when talking about the body politic. When we talk about broad terms of art like democracy or America, things like that. We always face a challenge, which is we want to speak in ways that are meaningful and purposeful, which is to say that are more than just mythology. Because mythology and politics don't mix well. But additionally, the further away you get from mythology, the further away you get from of universal interest to others. People often bring up the Greek division of persuasion into ethos, pathos, and logos. But there's something fundamentally misleading about that, right? Because your communication may appeal like explicitly to logic, to, I guess, personages, people of authority, people whose credibility should be respected, and appeals to sentiment or emotionality that's informative about how we authentically, as healthy humans, react to things that are unjust, perhaps, but not really informative about what we ought to do. But the thing is, the problem with categorizing things like that is it's getting you to focus on the wrong thing. The right thing to focus on is what is the person doing? This person is attempting to convince me of yeah. Why are they attempting to convince me? How are they attempting to convince me? You can categorize some kinds of appeals as logic, feelings, or authority, but plenty of kinds of appeal are best categorized as an appeal to simplicity. People have a great deal of ambiguity and tolerance, Yeah, I do think Kasky was an INFJ as well. And not a very talented one, really, unfortunately for him. But at least he got concision, right? Part of my problem in communicating things is, well, it's true that I basically can't appeal to authority at all. In other words, I don't have other people that the general populace affords authority to agreeing with what I'm saying exactly, right? In fact, those parties to whom the general populace would afford the most credibility regarding these issues are expressly not me. They're people like, depending on a variety of things, it might be somebody like Jordan Peterson, it might be somebody like Dr. Grande, it might be somebody like Dr. Phil, it might be somebody like, more scholarly, some professor of psychology from university or whatever. Those are the people who are going to be afforded credibility. So people who use that heuristic are going to not decide in my favor. But another part of the problem is that to the extent that I embrace what's actually communicable, which is to say, concise mythologizations, then I'm misleading about the nature of cognitive functions. That's exactly the problem when understanding personality right now, is that we have available to us an actually productive mechanical model of how human consciousness manifests in every instance. In every instance that we can communicate about. And the problem is, of course, that that if that mechanical understanding were the default frame of reference, then people could safely mythologize. But because it's not the default frame of reference, those mythologizations prevent it from becoming the default frame of reference because they get in the way of anybody serious who might have authority from listening to what I'm saying and taking it under full advisement, right? Nobody would reasonably think that uh, in this pile of this massive shit show called Typology, that there was anything singular or determinate at all, you know? But that's part of the problem. But, you know, the point is this, that if you're going to meaningfully talk about how to persuade people, you have to do more than taxonomy a few possible vectors in persuasion, such as emotions, authority, and logic. You have to additionally factor in things like the speaker's ability to read the room and see what's hitting and not, things like concision, things like, because, you know, the emotionality thing, people have different responses to each of those kind of appeals. If somebody's feeling strongly about something and you're making an appeal to logic, they're gonna they're gonna feel inherently defensive and probably even go on some offense, like, why are you so committed to this black and white thinking? People who, those same people, with their attentional manners being the same thing, if they don't feel strongly about something, are going to be much more willing to consider an appeal to logic, regardless of whether it's consistent with their function stack. So, like, when we were talking the other day on a stream, I think, and talking about like instances of Rachel and I disagreeing about something or having any kind of non-perfect compatibility. I don't think Rachel's awake yet. I think she's still asleep. Well, thanks, fellow ENTP. I appreciate you always being here for me. That's wonderful. And she said we disagreed on abortion. The thing is, I don't think we disagree on abortion. I just think it's an issue that she feels very strongly about and sees anything other than wholeheartedly pro-choice as, or vocally pro-choice as, somehow being disagreeing with her. But I don't think we really disagree about it. My position is a legal position, and hers is a preserve her preserve access for people position. And my position, I don't really have a position on that, except to say that legally the states should be the jurisdictional authorities over this matter. And also, here's why you can't resolve it as a moral issue. Those are my positions on it. Also, we're in agreement that were she to get pregnant, where she would want to, and I would be 100% supporting of her in avoiding that child, because we actually comprise a textbook example of how complicated the issue can be. There used to be It used to be called female ENTP, but now it's fellow ENTP. Hmm. Well, the last person I knew who called themselves female ENTP was definitely not a female ENTP. It was Brittany. She is as ESFP as they come. But anyway, so did I finish where I was going with those thoughts? I was going somewhere with those thoughts, but I'm not sure where. The thing is, I could convey a lot of information without using any jargon, by just calling it ways of paying attention, using words people already know. But from my perspective, you can't gain real utility from the thing unless you understand the mechanics of it somewhat. And it seems like if I'm not providing the mechanics, then it may just be projecting my own frame. I wouldn't be able to use understanding to I wouldn't be able to use understanding that direction, right? I understand some general thing and then apply it. It's like I got to understand the mechanics of the thing, then apply it externally. But maybe other people don't work like that. I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought. I had this thought when I was outside smoking earlier, and it occurred to me to note it and talk about it on a live stream, but I don't really remember exactly what it was now. Except probably it was, hey, Eric, don't forget to smoke a cigarette. So I will not forget to smoke a cigarette. Instead, I will remember to smoke one. And I will go out into the garage and smoke one right now with you. TE is indispensable. You got to build it to understand it. Well, I mean, it's true that in an ideal world, we'd build a simulation of a system that included all the elements necessary for the simulated agents within the system to successfully operate. And we'd use, we define terms, and we define our functions in terms of various statuses and experiences that we'd have to define as objects and or processes within the system. It's simulatable in theory, in concept, but I'm not smart enough to do that. I can't simulate it. I don't know how to write that kind of code. I don't know how to. I mean, maybe I could. Maybe I could simulate it as a game of some sort. But that would be easier because then you'd have an actual agent inputting information. But I mean, it could be simulated as a game, like a card game, which I've already kind of simulated it as conceptually. I just haven't worked the whole thing out. But it's like, if you look at my, it's called Function Rummy document, you'll see that you can articulate the functions in terms of like because if because you can represent the fields on just a square thing made into four squares, right? Uh, but of course, the thing is, in the game, you only represent externally the two external fields, and you represent behind your hand the two internal fields, right? And then your interaction with those various stacks and what you can do depends on which type you're playing as. So if you're an ENTP, you can put objects on external metaphysical field without doing anything else, just right away. If you're and like, and then you have additionally the capacity to check the status of a certain pile that's face down and determine that status uh, instrumental to some other action. Like it's like that, right? FI people can like convert arbitrarily like one thing in the stack to make it in the pile of cards to make it work for them. Uh, they have the capacity to arbitrary because they want it to be that they can make it that. So you can represent these things in a card game called function rounding, and that's probably the best model I have. It's not complete though. I don't tend to finish things. Once I get the idea of like, okay, so here's the scope of this project, here's the basic concept. Now I have to make a bunch of decisions about figuring out if the economics of the game actually work or if I have to adjust things. Because like in baseball, you need the first base path to be 90 feet 6 inches or whatever it is, and that way you get a lot of bang bang plays at first base. If it's 95 feet, there's not going to be any infield singles. If it's 85 feet, there's going to be too many infield singles. So, like, trying to figure out that part of shit, like the balance of powers and stuff within the game, that was where I just said, that's just a bunch of trial and error. We can't intuit shit about that. But when we understand the mechanics conceptually, like I do, you can see how you can take a game like Gin Rummy and conceive of it in terms of interface kinds of behaviors, deliberative kinds of behaviors, action kinds of behaviors, and knowledge kind of behaviors, if I didn't say knowledge already. As representations of paying attention, instances of paying attention. And you can see how you can break down like everything in the world that we can communicate about into instances of certain kinds of attention as, playing out into artifacts that are informative somewhat about how those artifacts were made because of what those artifacts express as values and as habits of communication. Like the complete absence of SI in Ted Kaczynski's nonsense. The belief that you can say these vague general statements that without any concrete example, that checking against reality at all, right? Clearly, not a good relationship with SI. And clearly no interest in engaging with particulars to test the validity of the universals that he's claiming, you know. And you might you might say additionally about it that there's a perpetual ongoing habit of creating reification fallacies, attributing agency to things that don't have agency, assuming a uniformity where there's no reason to assume that. In other words, applying the sort of monolithic will to undefined thing, vagary called the system, is underlying that whole piece of work is a reification fallacy. You can tell when you read it, or I can tell, it's not motivated by anything but anger. He's trying to universalize his anger to make it not about him, but about the world. Something's not wrong with Ted Kaczynski, something's wrong with the world, right? No, something's wrong with Ted Kaczynski. And his manifesto is simply a manifestation of his deep dissatisfaction with life, deep-seated anger, and an inability or unwillingness to deal with himself objectively and honestly, you know? The thing is, I would not normally make those kind of critiques. Historically, I wouldn't make those kind of critiques, right? Because it's not relevant. It's not relevant whether he's angry or not as to whether we should listen to what he says. But it's something I've learned to pick up on. I can tell when people are in their rhetoric are motivated by fundamentally their own anger, dissatisfaction, and not by an actual interest in assessing accurately reality or presenting meaningful advocacies, you know? Thing is, that kind of argument, Ted Kaczynski's clearly displacing his own anger onto the world, might be convincing to some people. And if it were convincing, they'd be convinced of the truth if they were undecided theretofore, let's say. That in fact, you should not listen to Ted Kaczynski at all. He's full of shit. But in my mind, it wouldn't be a good reason to conclude that. The good reasons to conclude it are the reasons I articulate in that video as I go line by line and destroy his nonsense. It's vagaries and mythologies posturing as commentary about society. It's as fallacious as Fanny Fallacy of the Fallacy Brigade. Nobody should afford it any legitimacy whatsoever. And you'll note what else I did not do in my critique of his shit, which most people would probably accept as the most legitimate critique of all. Why should we listen to this guy who has already committed terrorist act? Well, the thing is, I don't care who you are, what you've done, meow, 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 meow. The answer is always in the text itself. I don't need to access your bad behavior to drop an atom bomb on that pile of horse shit. I don't need to use any ad hominem fallacies to annihilate that befoulment of the metasphere. You know, reasons are really important. I've been trying to give this example for a while now, and I've unsuccessfully given it in the last year. I started it a couple of times, but I never finished it. I'm going to give the example now. The Supreme Court ruled that if your trash is out in front of your house, the cops can't use like empty drug bags they find in it to get a search warrant. As I was talking about it the other night, somebody said, well, yeah, they shouldn't be able to get a search warrant because somebody could have walked by and dropped it in that trash can. Well, that's true, but that's not the reason the Supreme Court ruled that they can't get a search warrant. The reason they ruled they can't get a search warrant is that it's proof that you used to have drugs, not that you currently do. Now, had the Supreme Court ruled for the other reason that that's not adequate to get a search warrant because somebody might have walked by and thrown it into the trash can, then what would have happened? The police would have simply posted somebody there, like a stakeout, to wait and bring the trash can out and watch to make sure nobody walks and put it by, and then sign an affidavit that in fact nobody, or film the whole thing so you have video evidence of the fact that nobody walked by and put something in the trash can, and then they'd be able to get a search warrant. If you give the first justification, you're just setting a new bar for the police to meet before they can attain the requisite probable cause to justify the search warrant. If you use the second justification, they can never get a search warrant. And that's why justifications matter so much. They matter so much more than anybody gives them credit for. In that instance, the court was very wise in making that ruling and making it the way they did, because they understood that when you use the wrong kind of justification, you've just set up a reality that says, and therefore it would be okay if you could meet this new standard, right? And that's what's happened to the Fourth Amendment in general, is the courts, trying to be conservative in their rulings, have issued rulings like, well, somebody might walk by and throw something away, so you don't really know. Well, then you just say a bar for the cops to know that, and then you basically said, I guess you met the standard I set, so I guess it's okay now, right? That's why justifications matter so much. So much.
Hi, handsome.
Hi, my beautiful darling.
I love you.
I love you too, my busty wonder. Rachel's being a busty wonder this morning. Ooh la la.
Oh, I didn't realize.
That's fine. You weren't showing anything you shouldn't be showing. I wouldn't have turned the camera if there was any nip visible.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, justifications are like super important. And one of the things that's also important is people need the rhetorical ammunition before they can do any good battling on their own. It's like a lot of people probably could read a little bit of that Ted Kaczynski thing and the vast majority of them will say it's bullshit for a variety of reasons, right? Like, he's the Unabomber, or they just smell bullshit, or whatever. But if you can't articulate specifically why it's bullshit, in other words, the mechanisms he used to bullshit us, then you're not going to be very convincing to anybody, right? I can articulate the mechanisms he used to bullshit us. He used a reification fallacy. He created an undefined, non-existent, monolithic entity called the system and afforded it agency, treated it as though it had a specific monolithic will. He failed to account for the actual nuanced reality of complex intermixing systems of doing of various enterprises doing various things with each with their own goals and the complexity thereof. He was in the most charitable light, massively reductive. He reduced reality into something vastly more simple than it actually is, and therefore any work he did on that model of reality is worthless. It certainly doesn't apply to actual reality because that simplification took out core mechanisms that are required for us to understand how reality works, right? We have to remember that while large groups may sometimes take action as a large group, say government or businesses or whatever, it's always individuals who actually make decisions, carry out things, etc. The only individuals have actually take action. Somebody representing a group might take action on its behalf, but it's not the case that the group, though it's monolithic in its decision, in other words, it made only one decision as a group and not another decision, it is not the case that within that group there is uniform agreement. It could have been hotly contested. You still only see the one decision, but what you're not seeing is that those processes of individuals, each with their own will and perspective, often vastly different from one another. Like, obviously, I differ vastly from Ted Kaczynski, but he doesn't take into account that there are plenty of people in the world who don't agree with him and don't agree with each other, just like he doesn't agree with everybody else, right? He's imagining a world in which individuals don't ultimately comprise the engine of everything, which they do. So, so you can see why and how there's no reason to afford it any legitimacy. He's just mythologizing. He's making up a singular boogeyman that he can demonize called the system. He's attributing to this thing that he's refusing to define a bunch of impacts that he has no business attributing to the system. He's making broad, unsubstantiated claims about how the impacts of the system have been wholly negative, when in any reality-based assessment, you would say that it's at worst a mixed bag, and that by comparing worlds against our current post-industrial life against, say, a pre-industrial life, that the former is clearly and vastly superior to the latter. That Hobbes perhaps got it right when he called pre-industrial life like something like nasty, brutish, and short. That's pre-industrial life for you. Nasty, brutish, and short. So, if you're predicating your treatise on the notion that the Industrial Revolution has on balance made people's lives worse, then we should just discount what you're saying entirely. Any sane human being would acknowledge that living in a world with electricity, plumbing, etc. is better than a world without it, in terms of each person's actual life experience. Now, granted, the current world's not perfect, as we see in those Japanese cartoons I always watch. People are slaves to jobs they hate all the time. And it's very difficult to live as a proper human being when so much of your time is already like spent on doing shit you hate. So, of course, the answer is more wealth and prosperity, not less. right now people are having to work harder than ever before, at least in America, to make ends meet, and it has a lot to do with COVID, the COVID lockdown, and the inflationary pressures that put on the economy made everybody poorer, made everybody's money go less far. Now you can't get out of the grocery store for less than $300, you know? When people are struggling to make ends meet, the answer isn't make the successful people less successful. And that's often what society seems to want the answer to be. The real answer is to empower everybody to be as successful as possible, to do as much meaningful, purposeful work as possible, because that generates actual new wealth, which enters the economy first as a metaphysical quality, a metaphysical object, you know. And accordingly, the standard of living will go up. The more the country can be genuinely productive, doing meaningful work for other people and getting paid for it, then the more the actual wealth in the country will outpace quantitative easing, which is an infusion of more currency into the economy, and people's money will become increasingly valuable rather than, and you don't want, obviously you don't want deflation. That's why there's quantitative easing. But the point is, people's actual buying power will return more in keeping to what's appropriate to their level of productivity. So, you know, people don't understand that. Like, somebody like Ted Kaczynski, in my mind, even if, forget about him being a Unabomber, let's just say he was just a guy who wrote that thing. In my mind, how can he even conceive of him voicing any opinion about these matters when he clearly has no concept of what wealth is, when he's not factored in individual autonomy at all into the equation, when he's not considered whether or not he needs to define the central boogeyman in his whole thesis, namely the system. I mean, it's like, that kind of discourse is representative of a failure in society to meaningfully talk about how we talk. So there have been all these failed attempts by schools and stuff to differentiate between propaganda and legitimate stuff, and they're all teaching kids these wrong heuristics to use. You can't differentiate with those heuristics. You have to actually parse out the specific thing being argued. We can equip people with the tools to do that, but only a few people understand those tools, like me, and the vast majority of teachers absolutely do not. You have to understand something before you can teach it. So, you know, now we see what's basically a rejection of freedom of conscience in educational institutions, where nobody wants any controversial arguments being made, and don't reward them, no matter how brilliant the thesis or execution thereof might be. That's a big problem, right? That means the idiots have taken over completely. There is, of course, and always will be, one last bastion of truth. Competition debate. In competition debate, even though bad arguments might become popularized, like the current bad argument that's being run everywhere as to why we should use a utilitarian framework in evaluating the legitimacy of policy advocacy, even though doing so is impossible, and the justification doesn't even link strongly, which is that, well, policymakers have to make decisions in absence of complete information. That doesn't justify utilitarianism as the first step in evaluating things. Obviously, the first step is, if we can articulate from the information we have that this is illegitimate because it's rights violating or whatever else, then we don't need to consider anything else, right? We don't need complete information to deem something illegitimate. If I drive my car into your house, we don't need complete information to know it's illegitimate. It's illegitimate. We need to know just that you didn't give me permission to do that, we're surprised by it and didn't want it. That's all the information we need to know it's illegitimate. Now, whether it's a civil liability, I had a seizure while I was driving and my car crashed into your house, and therefore I'm responsible financially for the damages, but not criminally, or whether it's a criminal liability, in other words, I willfully and intentionally drove into your house and or was guilty of criminal negligence, as per was so drunk that I couldn't control the vehicle, then I might have criminal liability, right? But what we know is that it's illegitimate. All we need to know is that you didn't want it to happen, you didn't give me permission, and you incurred damage as a consequence of my trespass, you know? So obviously that argument is bullshit. It is currently just run like every round, or last I was active in debate, was being run like every round to justify a utility. Anytime anybody wanted to run a utilitarian framework, they run that shit. It's obviously bullshit and can easily be countered by somebody making the correct arguments. And once those correct arguments are made, like I just made right there, and it wins some rounds, then people won't make those arguments anymore. The thing is, I was a little late coming to the realization that everybody was running it. I saw it over the course of a couple of tournaments, and then right after that I kind of left debate. So, like, I didn't have Jeffrey prepped for that argument when we encountered it in Marlboro. And everybody was running it. So, had I anticipated that people would be running that stupid ass argument, I would have prepped him just as I answered it right there. I would have said, this is obviously not true. Just because you have incomplete information doesn't mean you can't determine the matter of legitimacy on non-impact grounds, you know? And that's the first question in the order of operations here. So, fuck off, you till motherfuckers. You know, you wouldn't probably include that part in the round. Probably not. That might lose you some speaker points. They might run a civil discourse K on you, saying they should lose the round because they called me a motherfucker. The beautiful thing about well-judged debate is that's insufficient. They have to run a complete K. They have to run the full show, you know? They have to provide the standard, the violation, the alternative, why it's a voter, etc. Or else, like, you know, Jeffrey responded with the correct argument in one round when the opponents, I got out-coached in this round. The opponent's coach, knowing that what their kids had been running, that everybody knew what they were running, he instructed his kid to run their NAID counter plan as an app. Clearly not topical. Jeffrey chewed in on that fact, said it wasn't topical, but he didn't run the whole K. Didn't have him prepped out at that time. It's still in middle school with a high school tournament, I think. And I didn't have him prepped out yet with the full topicality K, because topicality is really a critique. They call it a theory argument, but same difference. It's still got to have a shell. He called out the topicality violation, but he didn't run the shell. He didn't say, here's the violation, here's the standard, here's the violation, here's the alternative, here's how you should impact it in the round. So the judges didn't vote on T. And in the RFDs, I had no reason to complain about it, And one of the judges said, I almost voted against you on T just because you should know better than to have run this sloppy ass shit. But he didn't do the shell, so I voted for you, And it's like, that's the beautiful thing about debate. You know why you lost if you lost correctly, if it's just been judged correctly. And you know why you won if it's been judged correctly. And you know also, if you're smart, when it's not been judged correctly. Because if you're a debater, if you're a regular debater, you know when a round has not been judged correctly. You learn to evaluate your own rounds objectively. And you know when you got lucky and got a gift, and you know when you got judge fucked, and you know when it's a well-judged round. And you can evaluate the quality of the judges easily enough too. If there are lay judges in the mix, you can always tell when lay judges judging the shit. It's like they're not flowing. They're listening to you, maybe FEQing you, when they should be writing down every fucking thing you say, right? Or all the warrants, claims, and impacts anyway. Ground argument, framework, whatever. Those things. Lay judges. I just kind of watch around and just give my thoughts about who I think won for no reason. I think you guys won because you were really clear when you spoke. Oh, God. That's not how you judge a debate round. That's how you award speaker points. In a good debate round, speaking clearly doesn't matter very much. Everybody's got copies of everybody's cases. They're following along anyway. Writing shit down, Nobody's got time for silly speech shit, There's real work being done. You don't have time to be all like, I am orating. It's ridiculous. Apparently, this year at Nationals, Jeffrey said in the final round, they're supposed to, at NDSA Nationals, they're supposed to do the final round slow, no spreading and policy debating, because the final round is supposed to be like a showcase of debate for everybody, even lay people, to appreciate what's going on here. And they know that if both teams spread, as they've been spreading the entire tournament, that no layperson will be able to understand a word of what's going on. So they're supposed to go slow, no spread in the final round. Apparently this year both teams spread anyway. So there goes that tradition. I mean, the thing is, maybe not though, because I would suspect that next year, one of the two teams in finals is going to be prepped to run a speed K if somebody spreads in finals, based on the fact that it's explicitly designated to serve this extra purpose that is contraindicated by you speed reading, So, I mean, people used to run speed Ks fairly often, but then spreading just took over and nobody runs speed Ks anymore. But you could run it in that context because of specific indications of it being the final round of NDSA Nationals. I remember I had a student at Rebecca High School student. He was my only. I had one high school debate team. The high schoolers weren't that into it, you know. But he insisted on running a speed K based on the fact that human beings can't process language read at faster than meow words a minute. But I told him at the time, the problem with this speed K is, of course, that's true for average people, but debaters are trained to process language at a much higher rate of speed than normal people ever process it at. Or than normal people ever even have the reason or opportunity to consider processing it at that speed. Debaters become trained to pick out the actual arguments from this block of text. This block of text may have one sentence that indicates what the actual mechanism of its warrant is. It may have several sentences all indicating the same impact in different words. And those are the things you need to pay attention to, right? Potentially also, if you like running garbage, like the source, you could run source indicts, you know. But source indicts are weak sauce. Deal with the actual language. This author is biased, therefore we can't trust what he says. The point is, you should never trust what they say. You should evaluate it on its merits. Right? It's always a bad idea to trust what this person says because he's such a big expert or whatever. Even big experts can be wrong. You got to evaluate what they're actually saying on the merits of what's being said, on the strength of the justifications and the strength of the reasoning and argumentation. That's the only way to meaningfully evaluate anything. But you know, life doesn't work like debate. Other people don't think like I do. And even other debaters, other debate coaches, you know, it doesn't necessarily come to define their worldview at all. A lot of debaters learn from debate that all arguments are equal. They're just pieces in a game, and it's a matter of moving pieces around most skillfully that wins debate rounds. Because a lot of times it is, right? Because there aren't that many coaches like me who insist that we will win because we are correct. Now, the reason there aren't very many debate coaches like me is because if you're advocating the app and the neg of something, how can you be correct in both instances? Well, in a very straightforward fashion. Negating, you can negate on very particular grounds. And you can negate the specifics of what the other person is saying. That the other person has not successfully met their burden to affirm is much easier to establish than that they have met their burden to affirm. So, and as a general rule, it is advisable that everything get negated relentlessly except that which survives that process and thereby establishes itself as having met its burden to affirm. So if you're correct on your app, and let's say it's an LD topic, which is a resolution, you have to come up with a specific case in support of affirming that resolution as true. Then even if you disagree with the app position, you can structure your case such that it highlights why we must affirm this contextually in meow ways for meow reasons, and not in other ways for other reasons, and how we can only affirm this if we understand it in these terms, in these definitional terms, because otherwise it's unaffirmable because it's bullshit, then you're fine. You're still correct, you know? You've not, at least, at the very least, you've not used wrongness to win. And that happens so much in debate, and it's so acceptable in debate, and it should be, that a lot of people can come away from the experience thinking that there is no correct argument, best argument, winning argument. I expected these to be tortilla chips, but they're sour cream and onion chips.
Surprise.
Looking at them from over here, they look like tortilla chips.
They do.
Maybe it's because they're in that beige bowl.
Yeah.
It looks like the kind of bowl a Mexican restaurant might put out with chips in it. That probably was a big factor in fooling me. I think I'm basically done figuring out Strawberry Chainsaw. I think I figured out how to play it.
Would you like to say?
I think I'm mostly done figuring out Strawberry Chainsaw.
Cool.
I figured out these two kind of unusual chords he plays in the chorus that are way up here on the fretboard. Just a G shape way up high. And I definitely figured out the chord progression. Like, if I were going to play bass for it, I could play bass for it, no problem. I'm not sure I have the chord voicing on D minor right. He's got an odd sounding D minor that doesn't sound like a regular bar chord D minor. I'm not sure where he's playing that one. But, you know, he's doing so much of his work with voicings. So, it makes a huge difference if he's playing that. I guess you'd call it F major 7. He's got a major 7th in it. You drop the bass note to E and then the other two notes or whatever they are in F. And he plays it up here with just 3 strings, right? So it's got this cool tonality to the voicing of the chord. If you played it someplace else, it wouldn't sound nearly as good, right? He does a lot of good and interesting work with his voicings. So.
That's so exciting. That's really fun.
He also plays it fast. Like when I was finishing figuring it out this morning, I had it at 0.75 speed, and I was much more able to figure it out. It didn't occur to me last time I was trying to figure it out to slow it down a little bit, you know. 0.5 is too slow. Then the chords sound like all stretched out. But 0.75 is a good speed to figure it out. And when I put it back up to regular speed, I was like, this is fast. It's really hard to do those damp, like.
Yeah.
But that helps also when you figure out the right voicings, it's a little easier to put together.
I'm really glad that we got the tickets when we did, and that you booked the Madonna in when we did too.
Me too. I was watching a couple of videos on YouTube of him playing live this morning. Looks like an excellent show.
Oh, that's so fun! I can't wait.
Everybody in the audience is singing along with all the songs.
Oh.
So, and have they got a tight schedule. They are traveling, you know, from San Francisco to Vegas to, I don't know, Not like within a week they're all the way in like Sioux City or something, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're staying in any hotels at all. I suspect they're just sleeping on the bus,
Yeah.
going from show to show on their tour bus or whatever.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, there's no way they're going by a plane because too much gear to move, stuff like that, you know.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure what we got planned for today, really. Did you get a good night's sleep last night?
I did.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Thanks.
I was struck this morning when I realized, oh, it's only Sunday. It's not Monday. I was like 7:30, I was like, oh shit, I gotta go into town and meet with that guy.
Oh.
But then I realized it was Sunday, not Monday, which means I've only had 2 abbreviated night sleeps. I got 4 hours Friday night, I got 5 hours last night. That's not too extreme, really. When I was thinking it was Monday morning, I thought, man, like, I guess I must not have slept at all Friday night. Then I slept 4 hours Saturday night, 5 hours Sunday night. And I was thinking, well, that's not nearly enough sleep. But then I realized it's only Friday night and Saturday night. You were probably getting alarmed for no particularly good reason.
That was probably what?
Getting alarmed for no particularly good reason. It's like you missed one night's sleep. Well, that's normal for starting a cycle, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I was thinking it was 2 nights, I was affording more legitimacy to the concern, you know.
Yeah. I guess because I didn't sleep during the day, I was worried that I wouldn't catch up, but it was just like you said, it was just reality.
I think you also underestimate the sleeping power of dopamine crash. I don't know what your natural mechanism is of staying awake for a long time without any amphetamines. But when you stay awake on amphetamines, I think it's probably true for everybody, then when the amphetamines wear off, you get very tired. You probably don't really need anything to help you sleep at that point because then you're in sleepy week crash. So, the nice thing about staying awake because of chemical reasons like that is that particular chemical reason has built in its own solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hi, Trouble.
I don't know, Waffle.
What you up to, Mr. Man? So, we seem to have lost, misplaced our ladle.
A what?
Our ladle.
Oh, yeah.
Our silver ladle.
Oh, that's so weird. It should be in there.
Maybe it is, but you know, people other than us were putting things away. Some of the time at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, who knows where it is. But we really need it because I turned the heat back on that stew. Figure we'll have it for lunch maybe.
Yeah.
And serving yourself crock pot stew without a ladle is a bit of a challenge. Okay, well, I think maybe I'm going to smoke one more cigarette, draw this stream to a close, maybe we'll have lunch, and I can take a shower, I can use a shower, Um, then maybe after lunch we'll see what the day brings, and maybe watch some TV or I don't know. Probably nothing too strenuous.
Yeah, I don't have high expectations for doing stuff.
Me neither. Therefore, we're once again on the same page. Alright, so let's follow through with this plan. I'm gonna smoke that cigarette I talked about smoking. And drink another sip or two of it. Apple juice. Honeycrisp apple juice. The best flavor of apple juice available. The best kind of apple available. Once you've had Honeycrisp, you don't want other apples.
It's so good.
It's so much better than regular apples. It's packed full of sweet, delicious apple flavor. If you like sweet, delicious apple flavor, then you're pretty envious right now because Rachel and I are supping upon a nectar comprising almost entirely sweet, delicious apple flavor.
Yeah.
So I went out this morning, like I put out seeds yesterday about 4 o'clock. It's weird, it's fairly early that if I put out seeds, it's too late for the birds to come get it. So like, I put it out 4 o'clock, none of the seeds got eaten until this morning. And I went out this morning anticipating that I'd need to put out more seeds. I discovered that there were lots of woodland friends already eating seeds, but in my discovery I also startled away our flock of turkeys that came again today.
Oh.
It was over on the gravel, and what was interesting is when I startled them, they all flew across the gully here to the other side, over to those logs over there.
Wow.
You know, babies and mamas alike, they all flew over there.
That's quite a distance.
They're much better flyers than peacocks. Because they seem to be able to like take off from like right away. They didn't really have to get a running start or anything, you know.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah. The mamas took all their babies and went over there because they saw me and they're like, I don't trust that guy. I guess in some sense they're right not to trust me. But by and large, they could probably rely on the fact that today is not going to be the day that I want to shoot one of them.
Yeah.
That they may never even come.
Yeah.
But they should trust me less than most other things because for most other things, it's absolutely certain that the day will never come that I will shoot at them. But for turkeys, it's conceivably possible that I might shoot at one day. Probably not, but maybe. You know, I could definitely see myself going out one day near Thanksgiving, out into the forest, parking the little car, like walking up onto this little like hill, sitting in a half-assed, naturally occurring, Eric doesn't have to do any work hunting blind, and waiting to see if I see a turkey going by. If I see one going by, try to shoot it
Happy Thanksgiving.
and eat it for Thanksgiving. That's conceivable. I could conceivably do that. I have to bring it home. If I did successfully do that, I'd bring it home and we have to look up on the internet how to clean a wild turkey.
Yeah.
And I'd have to figure out how to dress it and stuff like that. All of which I'm sure is very difficult for people who've never attempted it before. But all of which I'm sure is a lot easier doing it with sharp knives at your house than it is out in the field.
Probably, yeah.
So, the other thing is, I bet the turkeys around Thanksgiving go extra into hiding. 'Cause they probably know that now's when people want to shoot them.
Oh. Yeah, they probably do.
We probably figured that out over the years. They call it, um, they call it Human Insanity Week. Where all of a sudden the humans who've been feeding us seeds and stuff become homicidal maniacs. But yeah, that flock has been back like 3 days in a row. You know? So obviously they've decided, yes, that there are seeds here regularly. We're going to come back and check again, which I appreciate. I like the fact that you get to see the flock of turkeys.
I do too, but is it ruining it for the other woodland creatures?
Well, today the turkeys were on the gravel, and the other woodland creatures were on the wall.
Oh, good, good.
As long as I put it both places, the turkeys all seem to occupy one place or the other, and they all hang out together. They don't split into two groups. So as long as I put it in both places, there's seeds for the woodland ferns and for the turkeys. Additionally, the turkeys, unlike peacocks, it's extremely easy to startle them away. If they catch any sight of me at all, they go running for the hills.
The turkeys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not bothersome like peacocks who don't want to be shooed away, and even when you do shoo them away, they come back.
It's true.
Like those horrible peacocks. Every time we left the deck unguarded at all for a day or two, it would be covered in shit.
Yep, and they would go away for a little bit, and then, like you said,
Yeah, I'd chase them away with like a broom or something, or squirt them with a hose, and I try to squirt them far away from us as possible, but they'd only go as far away as the distance of the hose, and then they'd come back, you know.
There were times where I would successfully shoot them away. However, it took a good like 20-25 minutes. Me standing out there and being like, no, you're not coming back there.
Right, you had to be more stubborn than they were.
Mm-hmm.
You had to devote a good amount of your attention to shooing them away.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, we had one peacock that we had to feed, which just made it extra difficult to shoo them away because there was one of them we didn't want to shoo away. And then, it was like, not only was he my mom's peacock, but then he got injured really badly. So we really felt like we needed to feed him.
Yeah.
But fortunately, before we left LA, he seemed to have pretty much gotten over his injury.
Yeah, he did.
So presumably he's returned to life pre James Strauss, or maybe he, who knows how long my mom had been feeding that peacock. But he's had to make an adjustment. He no longer gets cat food from Rachel and Eric.
Yeah.
I seriously doubt the new occupants are feeding them.
Me too.
If they even are occupying it. I suspect they're doing a real estate flip thing.
That's what I was suspecting.
Because, if you, I mean, obviously we listed it at under market value, but I think we got definitely full market value for it in its current state. They may be thinking they can, like add a story or something, or some other thing that Chinese people like more and get 175 for it or something.
Yeah, like you said another floor, and then I could see them getting rid of the deck too.
Oh yeah, I mean those decks are fucking horrible.
Yeah, Dean really didn't like them.
No, he didn't.
You could tell he was like kind of like, You could put more space back here.
Right, yeah. Well, you know, it was an ESTJ's house. Unlike this house, it was designed to display so many things.
Like what?
Like,
Yeah,
how many shelves were there in that house?
Oh my god,
There were shelves everywhere, and they were all filled with crap. Every space available in that house was filled with crap. I mean, it was tidily, organizedly filled with crap,
Yeah.
but it was nevertheless filled with pointless objects.
Everyone always comments on how many books there were.
There's so many books. Of course, in the digital age, you really don't need to keep hard copies of books around very much.
True.
I mean, sure, I prefer reading a book to reading stuff on a screen, by and large, but it's not that much of a preference, you know. I prefer having one room that has all the shelves, like the garage. We got more shelves than we know what to do with in here.
Which is great, like.
I like having a pantry behind the door. There's nothing but shelves.
Yeah.
Note that nothing behind that door is therefore obviously for displaying.
Yeah, this house has a real lack of like places where you could display things.
Yeah, it's not meant to. It's meant to discourage people from doing that stupid shit.
No, I was reading about like colors, and white they usually say is a comforting color, but it can also look sterile. And I'm wondering if that's how it looked to like Delilah, in the sense that she was like, I'm
No.
gonna come back here and decorate.
It doesn't look. They said that Delilah's intuition was in play there. She was just intuiting that the ceiling fans looked bad and didn't quite know what else to say about it, right? But it's true that this space is a lot more sterile than any SFJ space could ever be, and vastly preferable accordingly, in my opinion. You know, it's not like we're not comfortable here. We're very comfortable. It's a very comfortable space. It's just not a space for SFJs to put up signs about their family. F is for the fun we have.
Right.
A is for a reason to put another sign up.
Or a cross.
Yes. I'm just not that fascinated with objects. I'm fascinated with this house and its brilliant built-in predisposal of objects. Like, objects are supposed to go there for that purpose. Purposeless objects don't have a place.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I don't find this environment sterile. I find it incredibly comforting because we're not overwhelmed with shit that's not in our wheelhouse to deal with.
And it because it doesn't. There's not a lot of pictures and signs and crosses, things on the wall. Basically, there's a lot less cleaning we have to do. Because when you have those sort of signs and stuff up on the wall, it creates a lot of dust, and we don't have to worry about that.
And ultimately, the thing to remember is every single object. I'm gonna go get my bong and the weed, and I'll be right back.
Oh, good, thank you.
Every single object has a maintenance cost. Even if it's something very useful that's very important, it has a maintenance cost. Like, for example, I've got these 3 different heights ladder right here, right? These are important to have 3 different heights ladders, and I'm glad I did. But the fact that I have 3 different heights ladders means that every time I want to get to this ladder, I have to move these 2 ladders, right? I could organize things differently so I could avoid that, but then I'd encounter other problems, etc. Every object has a maintenance cost. I'm going to have to run this engine on this pressure washer again at some point so I don't need fuel stabilizer, or I have to get fuel stabilized. I've already reorganized things in here many times. Little organization, like moving this here, cleaning up here, blah, 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 blah. I've touched many of these objects in here and moved them many times already. Each one of those experiences is an example of maintenance cost of an object.
Yeah. Yep. Some people are fine with, I mean, I don't know, fine with maintenance costs. Like, my mom is the kind of person who spends her weekend, or she sets aside a day specifically to clean. And I remember back in Arcadia, I noticed that Eric's dad had spray painted the gate, and I was like, wow, it looks really nice. So I wanted to compliment him, to say, hey, like, I saw that you spray painted you sprayed the gate with new paint. And he was like, well, that's what you gotta do when you own a place. He wasn't doing it for aesthetically pleasing things. He was doing it for the upkeep of the house. Which, of course, to someone who's an INFJ, I'm like, I don't even factor that in. I'm thinking, oh, it looks more aesthetically pleasing now. And to some degree, it does, but he's not doing it for that reason. He's doing it for the maintenance of it. And my mom, like, she sets a day aside to clean. And I was always amazed at her diligence with it, her keeping up with it every weekend, her waking up early, doing the laundry, dusting the house. She's also a 1, so she's perfectionistic
You're
about
talking about your mom?
Yeah. But she would maintain the house, but again, just like Eric's dad, it was like, well, this is what you have to do to maintain a house. Like, I'm not happy doing this stuff, but this is how to keep a house looking good.
Of course, it's hard to keep a house looking good when you got a million objects.
Yeah, and our house, did have, it did kind of, she was very against clutter.
Yeah, well, the thing is, of course, my dad at 84, 85, had accumulated a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When I was growing up, we still had a lot of stuff, but like my dad had a huge record collection and stereos and stuff, and not so many like pointless shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn on the lights.
I think being a 1 Enneagram lends to the person being a little bit more anal than the other Enneagram types.
Yeah, that's possible. it back into the first, and second time
Then it's.
it goes down to the B minor. It goes,
Oh
it's the B
yeah.
minor.
'Cause I'm more than sure you're the one.
Yeah. Clever little song, I gotta tell you. Cleverly written piece of work there. I was looking at the composition credits, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay, it's fine. And like a couple of looking at the band, it looks to be a three-piece with maybe a fourth person who's like playing the sample stuff that's in they use in the studio that they can't replicate with the instruments. It's like kind of not center stage as part of the band, but I'm assuming must be there. Anyway, it's a three-piece, and I'm assuming the other people who have like some lyric writing credits and stuff or composition credits are the other two people in the band.
Probably, yeah.
Because they delineate the credits to basically three different main people, Johnny plus two other people. So
Nice combination.
right, I suspect though that Johnny's the visionary and he's incorporating an occasional idea from the other people as it hits.
That
Right.
makes sense
Right.
because
It's not
he
art
wants
by
things
committee.
to be fair.
Yeah, he wants things to be fair, but it's definitely not art by committee.
No. Yeah, he's selfishly fair.
Well, what he is most of all is objective. If somebody's right, then he'll
And
incorporate
he'll
their idea.
incorporate it. That that's fair, right, and just and true.
Yeah. It's never fair. Always true. It's like, it's never fair. SI. It's always true. FI. SI is never fair. It's just your experience. It is what it is. What you know from your own experience is just what happened.
And then why is always true FI?
Because your emotions are always valid and only sometimes relevant. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's always true that I feel sad. It's not if I'm feeling sad, but it's not necessarily informative about anything.
No.
As we see with Ted Kaczynski, he's angry, but that's not relevant to why what he's saying is wrong.
No. What?
It's true that he's angry. That doesn't make what he's saying true.
I mean, this is gonna sound really judgmental, but we already know he's a madman, and then his manifesto just like proves it even more.
Well, it proves that there's no legitimacy behind his ideation. Whatever his justifications were for doing what he did, that there's absolutely no legitimacy to it. I mean, it doesn't sound insane to me. It sounds childish and petulant.
That guy, man.
It's like what's insane about him is that he was so unwilling to be honest with himself about himself that he became just this mindless expression of childish petulance. So much so that it turned him into an attempted murderer. I don't know if he actually killed anybody with that or not, but did he? I don't
From
remember.
what I remember it on TV. I just remember the panic of it.
Well, I know he blew something blew up, but I don't remember if anybody died or not.
It's a good question.
It's better than he's a murderer. You know, it's like he's so childish that he allowed it to make him into a murderer. I would not call him insane because he did not deserve that legitimizing label. It's like if he were really in the throes of a fugue state of mental illness, it would somewhat inform us about his culpability. He definitely was not. He's not insane. He's incredibly childish.
So, he's a domestic terrorist, and he was a terrorist from 1978 to 1995.
Well, you mean he committed terror acts beginning in 1978? Is that what that means?
It sounded like it, yeah.
Okay.
Planted homemade bombs at or sent them to universities and other locations, including people's homes, killing 3 people.
So yeah, he's a murderer.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about terrorist is a very loaded term, right? One thing we can conclude that's not a loaded term, that is exactly accurate, is that he is a murderer. It doesn't really matter whether his motivations are political or personal or whatever. Fact is, he willfully murdered people, and that's the most informative thing we can say about him. If we call him a terrorist, then we try to say, like, somehow people who murder for that stupid reason are different than people who murder for some other stupid reason. We shouldn't legitimize their reasons at all. Murderers are murderers. They are criminals, right? If you are a state doing warlike things, then you're committing an act of war. If you are an individual doing rights violations like murder, then you are a criminal. There never should have been created this extra legal term that fails to distinguish between criminals and soldiers, namely terrorists. People who murder individuals or small groups that murder other people are called murderers. We don't need to call them by anything else. They don't deserve to be called by anything else.
Did Hitler write Mein Kampf?
Yes.
It's like, I feel like on the same level as, to some degree as Typology. Like,
I don't think I've ever read it, but I think that probably is accurate, just based on my intuition on knowing Hitler's overall rhetoric and tendency towards like boogeyman creation, reification fallacies, and other bad habits of mythology. I would suspect you're right on the money. The thing is, what's important is that you don't need to bring in any pre-existing political frame or understanding of the world or anything to correctly evaluate and successfully evaluate the legitimacy of a given person's political writings. Now, while the composition of his rhetoric was all mythology, there's no doubt that it was directed as it was manifest as political speech. So it's political speech of the absolute worst kind. That is to say, promoting revolution by whatever means, and justifying that promotion of revolution by pointing to some actual problems in the status quo without ever even entertaining the notion that you could do something productive and positive to improve the system you condemn so wholeheartedly. Without even considering that maybe you should get other people's idea about whether they want the system to be overthrown, right? That if everybody else doesn't want the system to be overthrown, then maybe, just maybe, you should respect their desire to live in peace and prosperity in a civil society.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. When I'm manic, those sort of thoughts come into my head, like, oh, the government, this and that, like, just, ridiculous. It's all ridiculous because my mind is not in the right state. But
the government's a platypus. Corporations are a platypus.
yeah.
That was great. Phineas and Ferb. That's what that was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Phineas and Ferb episode where Perry the platypus is helping Dr. What's the doctor's name?
I don't know.
Dr. like Dorfelschmidt or something like that. Helping him rap and spin records.
Yeah.
There's a platypus controlling me. Now there's records on my fingers and I can't spin a minute. There's a platypus controlling me. That's a great song.
It is.
That's what I'm gonna say when I encounter shit like that again. The government's a platypus. Corporations are a platypus.
Yes.
That's basically all they're saying. They're not saying anything more meaningful than that, right? They're not actually analyzing corporations. Like, what is an incorporation? We have various incarnations of them. A city, for example, is an incorporation. People don't even care what it means. They don't understand that there are corporations with myriad different missions, myriad different ways of operating, and myriad different outcomes.
Yeah. You helped me learn that. In the beginning of our relationship, was very much like anti-corporation.
Well, you thought corporations were a platypus.
I did.
These corporations are lots and lots and lots of things. Same with government.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots and lots of things. Mostly what government is, if you want a clear and simple definition of it, is that body which has a monopoly on use of force. So in any governed society, be it free and civil or authoritarian, only government people are allowed to use force. Otherwise, you're committing a crime. If you stole my bike, I can't go beat you up and get it back. I have to get the police to do it for me.
That's the right.
That's
the right way, right?
But it's the right way, and it's the way in every society, whether it's a good society or a bad society. The government is defined and function is that body which exercises the monopoly on use of force, on legitimate use of force, Whether or not, as legitimate use of force as defined by the laws of that society, right? That governed populace. So, not necessarily, it could be illegitimate in actuality. if the government legitimizes use of force in inappropriate context legally. For example, enforcing drug laws is not a legitimate use of force by the government, in my opinion, but it's legitimate legally in the society because the laws have afforded the police those powers, right? So, and the courts have interpreted those laws to be legitimate. So, the point is, the best definition of government then is going to have to be one that encompasses every form of government, good and bad. And the only one that really does that is government is that body which exercises a monopoly on use of force. So, once we understand that, then we talk about government broadly. We understand it appropriately broadly. That is one thing that's common of all governments. And that's one thing that is both a necessary and a sufficient condition for being called a government. It is necessary that you exercise a monopoly on use of force to be called a government, and it is sufficient. So, that's the best definition. Now, when people start talking about government as though it were something other than that body which exercises a monopoly on use of force, you can say, okay, well, you're attributing to government a lot of specific things in general that differ dramatically between instances of governance, right? So you're probably misassigning to a general force of governance these things that you're attributing to it, because the only generality we can attribute to it is that it exercises a monopoly on use of force.
So Jeremiah Fix has a question unrelated to government, but it was what we were talking about. And he asks, if not for shells, where else are you going to keep the stuff you're obligated to hold onto for others?
Well, I mean, I'm obligated to hold on to all this family stuff for, I guess, Delilah, and I guess just a general sense that archived data shouldn't be just destroyed.
No, it shouldn't. I used to do that. Well, it was a little different. But like my yearbook, I was like, screw you, goodbye.
You were trying to control your SI space, you know?
Yeah, I was. Everything that had a memory to it, basically, not everything, but a lot of stuff that had any memory to it, I was like, I've been hanging out with this stuff for years, and it's in my closet, and I never look at it. I'm throwing it out. So like even like pictures and stuff. Yeah, anything that had an SI memory, good or bad, I was like, this is so part of my past. I don't need it anymore.
SI is bad. I mean, I find you blessedly unconscious of SI. Like, it's why you're so capable of being happy.
Thanks.
If you were too stuck in what had already happened before, you'd be mad all the time.
Yeah, and I'd be sad too, because like the happy stuff that I'd be looking back on, I'd be like, man, like that was a really good time in my life, or that was just a really good party, or I remember when me and so-and-so were at that place having good times. Really, oh man, you're making me so realize that, like, that's why like I delete like Facebook and stuff. It's like, yeah, thank you, honestly, for realizing, like.
Well, I mean, the thing is, your life never validated holistically before now.
Yeah.
So you were trying to tell good truths about a life that, on balance, you objectively weren't evaluating as meeting your subjective standards and not sure what to do about it because you didn't really value your subjective standards.
Yeah. I didn't.
So I think you probably kept trying to tell parts of the story that were celebrating, but they were only worth celebrating if you looked at them in isolation, and you have trouble looking at things in isolation because you're an NI dom.
Yeah. This might sound weird, but I do that with clothes too. Like if clothes have like a certain memory to them, or like I had a bad experience in them. I don't know. I used to donate clothes a lot, and my mom would be like, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, I don't wear it. Like I'm getting rid of it.
You were doing an object flush.
That's a great term for it.
Object flushes, for me, are a complicated mixed bag, but the further away I get from the object flush, the less conflicted I feel about it. In this instance, about all the stuff in my parents' house.
Yeah.
Because initially, there's lots of things I'm thinking to myself, God, I wish I had brought this, or I thought I brought this, why can't I find it, or whatever, right? But what I didn't get, and I'm still kind of getting slowly, is that I much better off gathering those objects I want to gather here and now, even if it means you already got rid of that thing and now you have to get a new one of that thing. It's much better in this phenomenon here than any alternative in which I had less of a complete object flush because there's no way to effectively go through all those objects, transport the correct ones here without being here and knowing what you're going to need first, And ultimately, I don't miss anything that didn't make it up here at all.
I'm just so confused as to where like your shirts are.
I have no idea.
I mean, you have plenty now.
There were various opportunities where shit could have either accidentally got put in a junk pile to take to the dump that was actually a box of stuff, There were opportunities potentially when somebody could have stolen something. I don't think that's what happened, but
No, I don't think that's what happened either.
I think what happened is stuff that was not supposed to be go to the dump pile. They just grabbed that too and threw it in the truck.
Yeah.
Because even though we were specific about it,
it could at the end we were rushing. And we had to get shit out of there.
Yeah. Regardless, I feel now a very agreeable sense of what I have and what I don't have, because we have a manageable amount of objects, and I have some sense of what I need, what I might need, mostly in terms of tools, different kinds of tools. Like, for example, we need to get a ladle. We've been needing to get more spatulas because I can't find the one spatula that I like. We like, things got misplaced during the wedding because people were putting things away other than just us putting things away where we normally put it, and we have other things now that we didn't used to have. We had to make new spaces for them and stuff like that. Anyway, all that stuff is fine. I just need to buy a ladle, but I no longer regret. Oh, I wish I had brought a ladle from Arcadia.
There was a freaking ladle.
Ladle.
A ladle. Like, where the heck did it go? And the same thing with the spatula. Like, what the heck?
It'll turn up. I guarantee you the spatula will turn up.
Okay.
Because think about it, Rachel. The alternative is that somebody stole that orange plastic
Which is
spatula.
so unlikely. And the only thing I could see, which might have happened, is that Cameron, while packing up, by accident took it.
Yeah, or potentially the caterer could
Or the
potentially
caterer.
accidentally
Yeah,
take something that they
yeah.
thought was theirs, you know.
The ladle could have been that. So, Moonfay11 asks, I do this thing. Out in the world, I'll sometimes find a token, feather, marble, pretty rock, stick, etc. And I'll bring it home. I have many of these things. I have no memory from where they came, but now these things have become valuable to me without any association to the reason I acquired them. Anyone else? Why do I do this?
Well, sometimes I find cool rocks. I'll put it in my pocket. Usually I'll manage to throw it away again outside before I actually take it inside or something. I used to be a little bit more sticky fingered with cool random things I find than I am now. Like I used to, when I was in Laverne, I used to walk along the railroad tracks and collect railroad spikes that had been ejected from the track, I guess when the train goes by. I don't know. You see some old rusty spike near the track, I guess maybe from when they changed it before or something. And I ended up using a lot of them. I spiked that palm tree in the backyard so that I could climb up it and chop down those horrible berries it made. Horrible, horrible berries. I was determined to solve that berry problem. So I made a railroad spike staircase up the palm tree. And I went up there and I had to get really high up to hacked off those berry things. This big ass like berry bunch coming off of this big stem like this. You know. It's tough as hell to cut through that thing because it's like designed to support the weight of this huge berry bunch, so it's pretty tough, right? And I cut them down, and then they just grow another one right away. It's like, oh, you cut down that one? I'm just gonna grow another one right now.
It's very Naked and Afraid alike.
Well, if Naked and Afraid people had hammers, railroad spikes, circular saws.
It's not exactly like it.
Because, you know, I went up initially, as always, I go up initially, I try with something that seems obvious, but turns out not to work very well, like a machete is not cutting this very well, it's a shitty machete or something like that. I eventually went up there with a long extension cord and a circular saw, and got it with a circular saw, and then I just had to cut a little bit more through with this regular saw to get it to fall down. And then I'd like hang on by like one thread, and I'd be like, oh, I have to like lean way over here, super high up to cut that one thread down. Anyway, and it was tiring, I'll tell you. You want to try something tiring, try climbing up a railroad spike ladder up a tall tree. And I had different spikes as like hand supports in various places too. It's still very tiring. And of course, because even at the very top of the tree, I'm just at the spot where the berry bushes are, right? I can nail no more railroad spikes in because above here, it's these little branches, right, that come out. Or big branches or whatever. It's like leafy stuff. It's not tree anymore. And all the berry bunches are right there. So I have to work at the top of my way up here, which is super tiring. That was another example of a miserable, doomed to fail thing associated with that time period where it seemed like everything I touched turned to shit.
acting like that. When my own aunt, like, basically cursed me with 7 bad years of luck. Mr. Bobby asks, you're in a big house, yet you managed to find a small, cozy location to reside in for streaming, like back in the old days even. Is this by choice or pathological?
Well, I like that you perceive us as finding a cozy location. In this instance, we're out here because I smoke cigarettes in the garage, and it's hot outside. When it's nice outside, I have, in plenty of previous streams, spent a lot more time bouncing from spot to spot, outside, inside, etc. Um, and I agree this space feels cozy to me, but I think it's more like I discovered that I came here a lot, and now that you mention it, I'll agree that it's cozy. Possibly I came here a lot because it's cozy, but that's hard for me to say. Um, Also, in certain moods, I prefer a cozier space. In certain moods, I prefer a less cozy space. Also, in certain weather, obviously, when it's cold outside, I prefer coziness more than when it's hot outside. This, in part, is cozy because it's cool compared to outside because it's the garage. And it feels even cooler when you got the lights off, even though it's not actually changing the temperature. Um, Of course, Rachel and I aren't really great at adjusting the thermostat inside, so I've got a jacket on because when we sleep till I get cold, but I get up earlier than Rachel, and then I forgot to turn it up. Meow, 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 meow. You're welcome for the answer, and I'm going to hazard a guess and then say that Rachel says you're welcome for the reading the question.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I was right. My guess was correct. I mean, the thing is also, to a certain extent, every particular space within this house is cozy, even though the general space isn't especially cozy seeming. Uh, there are not any huge rooms. You know, the biggest room is the living room. It's not that big. Uh, but the house seems to have more space because the foyer is very tall and open window kind of light, you know. It's really designed to provide both lots of natural lighting opportunities and also privacy. Like there are windows where, like the glass doors from the dining room look out onto an area where none of the neighbors can see into at all. So it doesn't have any curtains on it, and that's fine. I don't spend much time in the upstairs rooms, so I kind of have limited perspective on them. See, I suspect, Lou and Rachel, that you're assuming that when you're giving people that object, that it's infused with the NI meaning with which you understand that object, and that they will get some of that meaning.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't start it myself, like I said. I took it from a friend. Um, but
Took what? Bracelet making?
the idea of like giving stones that I had like to people, like as a little gift, if they were nice or I had a good time with them, I'd be like, hey, so I have these amber stones with me. It's from a bracelet that broke, but here, would you like one? Amber, maybe I would give a little tidbit on what amber like stands for and mystical thinking.
I tell you what it stands for in herds. Shitty. It's an Amber Heard joke. Yeah. I know it's not really very contemporaneous with trending topics, but I thought I might as well just go there. So, anyway, a character on TV show Shrinking, that what it called, think does that? I'm not sure what. Oh, I think does that. A character on TV show Shrinking does what? Does Debbie do Dallas? The problem with dealing with chat is that it's not contemporaneous with the topic, which changes a lot, you know. So Moonface says, I think that's spot on, Eric. A thing is almost never just a thing, and there's a hope that the meaning conveys. Sometimes it probably does. Sometimes I'm sure not. I mean, that's a very NI frame of reference. That an object can have more than sentimental value that's a particular development, you know? Like, maybe I feel fondly about, there's some objects that I no longer have, I don't think, that I feel fondly about, like that little wooden guy I made who had his hands in his pockets. I don't know where that guy is. He's gone forever, I guess, but I liked him, and I thought that was cool. I have sentimental attachment to it as something I made, even though I'm not good at making things like that. That one came out good. But the idea that anybody else could have an equivalent relationship with that object, to me seems counterintuitive because I'm an SI type, right? I'm not knowing the object in that instance first and foremost as itself, but I'm knowing it through my experiential relationship with it. And so I would assume that somebody else would not take away meaning from it. That's just both of our assumptive frames of references and where they approach something differently. It's not that either of them is correct or incorrect. I don't dress well at all, don't care for that, yet I still can't throw away childhood toys of mine. I feel it's part of my pathology. Well, I will tell you that unburdening yourself of objects, it has a regret cost that comes along with it somewhat, but that you're somewhat in control of that regret cost. I have a habit of, I've saved this like roll of some kind of netting that I salvaged from these like screen doors that my dad gave us that I didn't like, and I cut up the netting part and figure I might
Yeah.
use that someday, right? I have a habit of doing things like that. For example, when I cut down the awning out here, I saved all the tarp because it's just too potentially useful. And in fact, I have used it a couple times. And in fact, I'll probably use it again because I didn't use it correctly the first time. This curtain is clearly too short. And so is that one. Really, it's not this long. It's not long enough this way, and it's also too short. So I really need to do it again. Fortunately, I have this huge piece of tarp that I can cut it from. But I also have a habit historically of saving things like that, not using it for a long time. Never encountering an instance when I need some netting meshy thing, right? And then finally going, you know what? This is dumb. I'm throwing this away. Then like the next day,
Oh my god.
I need that thing. You know,
Oh man.
I have a long history of that
Oh
occurring.
man.
So that's part of the regret cost of getting rid of shit.
Yeah, there is that.
But you gotta be kind of rational with yourself and say, now look, I still would have been better off had I never saved this thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And I would not have needed it. I would have needed it now and not had it. I need it now and still don't have it. And I spent God knows how many minutes to hours potentially moving this thing, thinking about it, where's a good place for it, what am I going to use this for? All time just lost to the past, right? For no good cause. I should never have saved it in the first place. It doesn't matter that I need it now. I don't need to have every kind of thing available in case I might need to half-ass an Eric solution for something. It's fundamentally a bad idea. If I, in almost all TE kind of situations, the thing you need is something specific that you have to go to the store and buy. Because I think of objects as mostly useful for playing with. You know, it's like my solution to the hot air balloon thing is to play around trying to come up with some hot air balloon thing. I'm sure I could have gone on the internet and Googled how to make a miniature hot air balloon.